Today, I have with me the founder and CEO of a startup that is looking to disrupt one corner of the residential rental industry. However, if he has it his way, this will eventually be its own asset class. So I've got with me today Commons Brad Hargreaves. Brad, thank you so much for being with The Real Deal.
Thank you for having me on. Excited to be here.
It's a really good time to talk to you, and there's a lot to dive into. I want to thank the sponsor of this series, Markham LLP. Thank you for your support. Let's talk directly about the business opportunities you've seen as you've come back to a city that has had one of its most trying times since its history, really. Can you talk a little bit about the shifts that you might have seen having been out for a little while?
Yeah. So when we started Common 5 years ago, it was really organized around affordability. And affordability meant a certain thing at that time. And for many people coming to a place like New York, it meant sharing an apartment with roommates. And so we built what has become the largest co-living operator in the United States. Affordability is still really important. It's not like the pandemic suddenly made everyone wealthy enough to afford their own studio or one-bedroom apartment in the neighborhoods they want to be.
Two things probably happened, right? One, the market for traditional rentals has dropped. But
Right.
two, the economic situation of a lot of people that you're probably targeting has worsened as well. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's we see a lot of the pain from the deals we look at, from the partners we talk to at the luxury end of the market, as well as anything short term, anything hospitality related. So we're looking at a number of assets right now from an operational standpoint that perhaps they used to be hotels. We're seeing some student housing assets come up and look at repositioning strategies to multifamily or co-living, or the original business plan of an asset that's coming to market right now, or has been on the market. It just doesn't make sense. And owners, operators are saying, what do we do now? How do we use the tools at our disposal to get a better outcome here?
So let's zoom out for a second. I read this piece by, I think, Lizzie Whitcomb of The New Yorker, and she had this great phrase in there, which was, your company really targets this period of extended adolescence, which everyone in New York knows, right? It's sort of after college, there's a sense of rootlessness, particularly on the social front. But it's safe to say that you've really gone beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, community is always a really important part of what we've done. And that remains a big part today. I think we've expanded the definition of what that means. Originally, it was very narrow, focused on these roommates done better. So sharing apartments and really fixing the experience of sharing an apartment. But now we have 3 brands under our umbrella, which most people don't realize. One of those brands is Kin, which is focused on families with young children. I feel like, as a parent of 2 young children, there's a real need for community there, particularly when you're living in an apartment building in a city. And when you do look at who is leaving cities, a lot of it is families, because the city experience, as much as we as parents may love the good things the city has to provide, it was already hard. The pandemic made it harder. So with a brand like Kin, it's okay, how do you create something that has the amenities that a young family who loves the urban environment, loves the amenities, loves the togetherness, loves being near all their friends, doesn't want to go live in a single family detached home? How do you provide all those good things, but just make it easier to be a family in an urban environment?
Because the value proposition for a 20-something single person in New York was always very high. That is also being questioned, but the value proposition for the family was always sort of on the edge, right? It was probably the most tenuous. A little bit more yard space and someone would take flight for somewhere else. So that's what you're talking.
It was wrapped up. So much of it is wrapped up in identity too. I myself grew up in a rural area, very rural, and we love being residents of the greatest city on earth, New York, and so that is part of our identity, and the idea that, like, okay, we're going to give up, we're going to move out to a suburb, we're going to move to a smaller city. I think is challenging to the identity of a lot of people. How do you keep the good parts of being in an urban environment, but make it easier for families?
So I'm curious then, Brad, what is the Kin equivalent of the white picket fence? Like, what is that community amenity that you're talking about here? Because
so A lot of it really comes down to the bringing families together in ways that are both utilitarian as well as kind of fun value add. So utilitarian is like date night drop off. You know,
Okay.
uh, everyone wants to go out on Friday night. It's kind of silly for everyone to go hire their own babysitter. So this is a program where you can drop your kid off with someone provided by the building who's certified, background checked, etc., and makes that date night so much easier.
Hmm.
There's also just fun programming for kids. So story time is something we run at both Jackson Park and Kin on Union, our first dedicated kin building. So Kin on Union, we're the property manager of the building.
Okay.
And so we do that because it's not just a layer on top. It's not just a bolt-on layer of community. Not as fun to talk about, but a lot of the core of our business really is a layer of technology and automation
Hmm.
that lets us do a lot of things that save money and add value on the property management side. That is not as fun to talk about as the community events and the story times and the date night drop offs.
Right. It's also like sort of waste disposal and how many, I think you had an example in one of your interviews where you talk about how many gallons of water are used by a certain demographic versus another. And then you could, I mean, that's the stuff where landlords really will need to start saving now, because they were building into a rising market and you can assume rents are creeping up slowly. But if rents are flat, they will have to find the savings elsewhere to make the numbers work, particularly in these giant buildings.
And that's been actually the biggest driver of our growth this year.
Uh-huh.
So far this year, we've 3x'd our number of units under management, going from around 1,500 to about 4,000 units under management so far this year. One important thing to understand about what Common does across all of our brands is we centralize. Sorry, let me just.
That's all good.
Turn.
This is why I'm glad it's not live sometimes.
There you go. So one thing that's important to understand about what Common does across all of our brands is we centralize a lot of aspects of operations. To give you an example of that, leasing is much more centralized at Common. When a lead comes in, that lead doesn't go to an on-site leasing agent. It actually goes to a central call center, which lets us do a few things. One, it lets us respond to that lead immediately. There's a ton of data out there that the faster you respond to a lead, conversion rate increases, not by 10%, not by 20%, but by 3x or by 5x if you can get back to that lead within 30 minutes, ideally 10 minutes. It lets us schedule either schedule an in-person tour with an on-site leasing agent or a virtual tour. Pre-COVID, about 30% of our members converted from a virtual tour alone. That is, they never even stepped foot in the building, never spoke to anyone at the building. They just spoke to our central team.
Initially, I'm assuming there was a lot of you going to pitch landlords, hey, look, we can come in and do this better for you. Now, given what's happened in the market over the last 6-7 months, I'm guessing they're coming to you as well. Help me understand the level of anxiety and the kind of conversations you're having.
Yeah, I would say it runs the gamut. I mean, we have some wonderful programmatic partnerships with owners who see the value in the centralized operating model and are looking to really create something more tech enabled for their buildings. So a great example of that is Nuveen. We took over 2 large Class A multifamily assets, Nuveen.
And let me just for our viewers, this is like in context, Nuveen, formerly TIAA, like incredibly traditional, institutional, as sort of white collar blue chip as it gets as a in terms of real estate ownership, right? Yeah.
Exactly, and they're one of the 10 largest real estate asset owners globally. Very institutional, but they really love the technology side, the centralized operations, the standardization that we have in operations across the board is a big part of the pitch there. It's less about co-living or any specific real estate product. On the flip side, we have owners who come to us and say, "Hey, I have a hospitality asset. I don't know what to do with it. We hear you guys are really good with micro apartments. We manage a lot of micro apartments in addition to co-living. They're really 2 sides of the same affordability coin." We speak to new owners. we often ask them to send us their stuff that's not doing too well right now to underwrite.
Okay.
And we'll put the team on it and see what we can do. And we have a lot of tools at our disposal, from the technology and the automations we have to product types that we can even roll out in existing buildings like co-living.
That's interesting. Let's talk about that a bit more, because let's say I take the train into Manhattan, either Hudson Yards or Grand Central, take your pick. Those were sort of the two, at least that's the lifeblood of, the central business district was the way you think about Manhattan, right? Now, when you go there, if you're a landlord, it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. These hulking buildings, some of them brand new. And I had a pretty spirited conversation with Bill Rudin about this. No matter what anyone tells you, a lot of that space is just not going to be used as office anymore. So my sense is you're going to go into buildings like that, or you're going to be approached to go into buildings like that. The question I have is twofold. From a technical standpoint, how easy is it to repurpose space? And then from a philosophical standpoint, if you have a 1 million square foot building and you're taking over, let's say 150,000 square feet, how to make sure that it's not just how to make sure that it doesn't feel like a hulking office skyscraper once you guys are done with
And
it.
maybe you're not going to like my answer, but the answer is usually you have to scrape and start from scratch. Which certainly, I mean, you have all these questions about dead malls. What do you do with dead malls? Do you try to turn them into apartments? It's like it's completely the wrong structure for that. And frankly, a lot of, I would say, not to get too technical, but
no, get technical. Our readers are real estate people. So.
Generally, with commercial, we get shown a lot of commercial office buildings. It does not work 95% of the time. Generally, with buildings that were built 1960 and beyond, it works 0% of the time, because you tend post 1960 to have really fat floor plates. So there's no way to get light and air into the interiors of those units. You end up with a really, really high loss factor. You also have to run additional mechanical up the building. So, offices typically don't have sufficient,
toilets, even
gas, water, sewer, electric, like the needs of a residential building from a mechanical standpoint, from an HVAC standpoint, are quite different. And once you're talking about ripping out and replacing all those systems and the lines you'll have to run through the building, really all you have left is like the steel and the concrete structure, which is in many cases more of an impediment than it is a benefit.
Ownership is not in the cards at all.
No aspirations. We have a very explicit mission to be the best third-party operator that has all the tools, from technology to innovative products, at our disposal that we.
So if you pull a WeWork in a year and you're called Common Property Fund or anything, I'm going to come after you for that. That's okay. All right.
We be competing with our clients, and that's not in the cards. That's not what we want to do. So just going back to the type of assets we see, we also see a long tail of different things. We've converted a number of churches, hospitals sometimes. We have one or two of those, schools. So sometimes you see these interesting alternate use cases that can convert really well to residential.
Yeah, that's what I find most interesting about your business is you're blurring the lines between assets. What about the philosophical side of that then? Suddenly there's a community in a building that didn't have any. Suddenly there's a sort of a shared life in a city that often neglects that in a residential building. I
would say two things that contribute to that. One is just kind of breaking down the walls and encouraging people that this is a friendly place to live. We want to know our neighbors. We don't want to all be anonymous here. And then giving forums for people to connect around not just general, like, hey, we all live in this building, but also very specific interests. So our philosophy on building community is it has to start interest-based. And that also takes the burden off of us to run every single event and be the cruise director of the building. It's not, we're their property manager. So we have to put the technology and the tools in their hands. So if one resident says, hey, I go for a run at 7 a.m. every Saturday morning, I'm going to start a running club for people in the building, they can do that. And we don't have to staff that. We don't have to organize it. So if 3 people go running every Saturday morning, that's not a failure. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I feel like when the property manager is too hands-on and too involved in
Yep.
curating that community, it actually creates a watering down of the events, because you want to have events that anyone and everyone can go to.
Yep.
If you don't have 30 people there, it's a failure. So there you get, you get the wine and cheese night at 6:30.
Exactly. Yeah, I could speak to that. I've been to a community event and I took the glass of wine and I essentially went and became antisocial again.
We looked at renewal rate, and one of the things it correlates most highly with is, are you friends with 3 or more people in the building?
Mm-hmm.
If you consider 3 or more people living in the building your friends, doesn't matter how you got to know them. That's the important part. And in my view, we just happen to be living in the same building is not necessarily enough to break the ice, make people social with each other in the way that, like, hey, we all like, to watch Schitt's Creek, or we all like to go running. Like, those are reasons why someone would form a relationship, would become friends with someone, not like, oh, we happen to all live at this address. So if we could just connect people with shared interests, it makes our job a lot easier.
And are landlords getting that? Because they've done things a certain way quite successfully, you could argue, for a long time.
Well, yes. I mean, I would say it's particularly powerful now post-pandemic that people are feeling some pain, and they're looking for new ways to do things. They're looking for ways that are more optimal or more efficient than the ways they've been done in the past.
Mm-hmm.
When everyone's hitting their pro formas, there's no incentive to try anything else.
Yep. I'm fascinated by the other bet you've taken, which is remote work, right? You guys had put out an RFP for pretty ambitious projects, 300 people plus projects. Right. Talk about what the vision is for that.
Yeah, so back in the spring, we started seeing more and more companies, particularly West Coast technology firms, but also a number of creative firms, say, hey, we're never coming back to the office. Yep. People can work remotely forever. Yeah. They have come out and said that you're going to take a haircut to go to those cities. And some, like Stripe, have made that explicit and said, we will pay you actually upfront lump sum to move to another city. But obviously we can't guarantee your Bay Area salary will continue forever in that other city. So it's almost like they're lending you money.
So what Netflix is doing is quite interesting. They're paying you 70% of what you make in LA or SF or in New York, and they're letting you go somewhere else. I mean, they're saving 30%, but 70% of an SF salary is like 300% of a salary in somewhere like Austin or somewhere like that, right?
And I think it raises a lot of really interesting questions, specifically, where do these people go? And then how do cities approach this new world of competing for talent? So if I'm an economic development officer of a city, the way I've always worked is, I work through brokers, I work through public RFPs to recruit headquarters, to recruit factories, to recruit new offices that each bring a chunk of, 300 here, 500 here, 5,000 there, jobs to my city. Suddenly, in a world where workers are choosing where they go, economic development becomes less of a B2B activity and a B2C activity, but you've still got this engine that knows how to do B2B. We released this remote work hub RFP, which is really to create a live, work, play hub for people who can choose to live and work wherever they want. It could be a freelancer who wants to, move from place to place, spending 3 months in a place at a time, or someone who's really looking to pick a new home and settle down, but wants, a lot of the comforts and trappings of the density they perhaps left. We think that people are going to migrate primarily to less expensive secondary and tertiary cities. It's not going to be about people going into the wilderness in Wyoming. That people are going to get tired of that pretty quickly. But they don't necessarily want to go back to the super expensive hubs of New York, San Francisco, LA, et cetera. So we're very bullish on kind of that middle range of cities that have density, have good amenities, but have some real affordability. So, and in many cases, these cities really weren't able to participate in the evolution of the tech ecosystem to date. So what the remote work hub is, hey, this is a really easy, straightforward process that fits within your existing system, which exists primarily to respond to RFPs, but is about attracting remote workers.
Have you made any progress on what you talked about in a couple of interviews where you talk about, the most exciting thing for you would be if a common member in one city then goes and lives in a common in another city, the sort of the ping ponging of the worker. Have you seen that happen yet?
Yeah, we absolutely have. I would say it's under 5% of our market right now, kind of bounces between place to place, but we do allow people to transfer seamlessly within any of our brands.
What does seamlessly mean?
Really means 2 weeks notice. You don't have to break your lease. You can just transfer it to a lease in a new city. There are obviously certain restrictions around that. So you can't, for instance, stay in a unit for under 30 days. So you can't kind of use it as a hotel.
Okay. So the RFP thing would take into account that someone who may choose to live in one of these buildings would also maybe want to go to South America 90 days later, right? You would take that into. I'm really interested because you're going to be dealing with a bit of a mobility problem. You're going to be dealing with people who, because they choose, they're a self-selecting bunch as well, right? The type of people who are going to live in this complex are also flighty people. They have the economic ability to jump. They have the mindset to jump. So how are you dealing with that? That becomes a logistical problem that you didn't have before.
Yeah. So I would say right now we certainly let people transfer within the network. So, we're not in South America right now. So there's nowhere they can transfer in South America. We're only open in the United States.
I just meant in terms of attrition and turnover in buildings like that would be higher than a standard complex.
Yeah, it very well could. And I think we just have to plan for that and underwrite for that. We in our experience, it's less about one or the other being bad, but just do the economics support it. If the rent support it, if the staffing supports it, it's totally okay to have some segment of people on 3 or 6 month leases.
Eventually, you'll have enough data to get patterns on how many people do that kind of thing. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we can make projections today based on what we've seen and gross those up for kind of where it is and the kind of project it is.
Where are you what kind of people? I'm very curious about when companies, fast growing startups like yours, the kind of people they hire changes quite dramatically. And like, are you hiring, for example, sort of people who are experts in urban mobility?
I wish I had some sexy, exciting answer to tell you, but it's software engineers, to build more automations, to improve our platform, because we're rolling out software that makes everyone more efficient. Vast majority of hires. I think where it gets exciting, we're hiring a PR and partnerships manager right now to work with major brands that want to do product placements and partnerships to access the common audience. Something I'm super excited about. We haven't done much there to date, but we're excited to do more there going forward. And some of it might be, more digital partnerships as well. So partnerships with, a financial organization to help our members, work through financial issues or consolidate their debt or what have you. So those kind of partnerships get me really excited about the future and what we can do at scale. We're also really leveling up just the size of our real estate and our underwriting team, the people who go out and win deals and do new projects for us. Just we've seen a lot of interest from real estate partners and need to continue growing there.
You're actively, your business actively tinkers with people's lifestyles, right? That's maybe an elegant way to put it. With the next evolution of it, getting into things like, would you try to figure out healthcare, for example, for people? Would you sort of be a bridge between, because people are going to go, given the healthcare system in the US, is there potential for you guys to kind of act as some sort of bridge? I'm thinking of healthcare, but any other sort of ancillary part of someone's life Do you see potential there beyond the real estate for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a build versus buy question or a
Mm-hmm.
build versus partner question.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly for something like healthcare, I think we can only tackle one incredibly complex legacy industry at a time. So there, it could be a partnership where we say,
Yeah.
okay, here's, we're working with, One Medical or Healthjoy or something like that to offer this service to our members for a discounted rate. We partner with Obligo on security deposit replacement and renters insurance. That's been a great partnership. They've been super flexible with us. One area that we're going to really expand into in the coming years is cleaning up cells, allowing people to book any cleaning at any time.
You came up among a breed of sort of glamorous, some would say overheated startups. The New York Times has called it fat startups. I believe you closed a 50 million Series D a month ago, and you've raised more than 100 million to date. There's obviously competitors who've raised a lot more and then have had some spectacular flameouts. I'm thinking of WeWork as an example. I'm also thinking of a company called Roomy, which was doing that roommate matching service. And there was a lot of criticism about the way they spent money, right? Just because you got VC money doesn't mean you need to blow it all. So I wonder, as a founder, I wonder how you resisted the lure of spending money too quickly.
It's a tough question, obviously. From common standpoint, one of the challenges, but also the big opportunity here is, we're full stack. We're not just an app. We're not just a brand. We're not just a property management platform or a property manager. We're all of the above. We're kind of a full service platform that can work with anyone from a Nuveen on the institutional side to a mid-sized local developer that has, a challenging assets. And we said, there's nowhere we can just kind of insert ourselves in one layer of the value chain and build a big business there. And I think there's a reason you've seen a lot of like the roommate matching apps. There's been 1,000 of them and none of them have worked. And I don't think it's because Roomy was profligate in spending money. I think it was an unworkable business model and they just got noticed because they spent a lot of money. So I think if you had run a lean roommate matching startup, it still would have failed because the business model doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
The business model doesn't make any sense because at the end of the day, you're just dumping people into the same broken system and the same broken buildings that have always existed. So if you actually want to add value there, and by adding value, creating value and capturing some of that value, you really have to kind of get in the weeds of it and replace multiple parts of the stack, which unfortunately is expensive.
How did you resist? Oh yeah, okay. I'm tired of being in an office where I can touch both walls, for example. Maybe I should get something better. Maybe I need to get a high flying exec who costs a lot more than I really can be. How did you resist those? There are multiple points of temptation in a process of building a company, I'm sure. So how did you kind of go about that?
Yeah, and obviously there are a lot of places where we wasted money. I would not say we wasted money on the obvious profligate things, but I think there were some things that we thought were more important than they actually were.
Such as?
We had beautiful furniture that was way too expensive.
The Scandinavian stuff, right? I saw that.
Scandinavian stuff in all of our existing buildings, and we shouldn't have gone all the way down to IKEA. Like that would have been a mistake, but we didn't really understand our audience and how much they needed all that. And the truth is they really didn't. Like it had to look beautiful, it had to photograph well, but you can make a beautiful building, a beautiful furnished unit that photographs well, spending well less than $20,000 furnishing a 4-bedroom unit. Like you can do better than that.
Did the lessons from a company like WeWork, which I know that GA was looking at co-working or was doing a form of co-working as well. Did the lessons of a WeWork sort of sit with you? Did you take anything from that whole crazy rise and fall?
I mean, there were a lot of things they were doing at WeWork that were so beyond the pale of anything we would do at Common. I don't think we ever spent money profligately, but like, I'll give you an example.
Hmm.
There are some, I think, to defend Adam and WeWork for a second, there are some things they did which were, to a tech audience, were unforgivable conflicts of interest. But to a real estate audience, were like totally normal run-of-the-mill stuff. Like, you know, you've got your propco over here, you've got some investors in that, you've got your opco here, you've got some investors in that. Like, they're dealing with each other. I'm an investor in a few of the deals too, personally. And like, it all just kind of works. And as long as everyone makes money, everyone's fine. Like, that is totally normal in real estate.
That is the culture of real estate. LLC, and they're independent. Yeah.
I feel like one of the things that got WeWork in trouble is they were trying to combine this world of like, you know, tech, like big company tech, public markets with like private, tightly held New York real estate. Mm-hmm. And there are some things that are okay in the world of tightly held New York real estate that would never fly in the growth stage public markets. And I think you have to be super cognizant of your audience.